U.S. President Joe Biden, he is in the Republic of Ireland after a trip to Northern Ireland today to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. That deal ended decades of sectarian violence in Northern Ireland. Today, Biden urged the government there to break a political deadlock in order to thwart what he describes as enemies of peace.
It was a trip that was over in a flash. Joe Biden popped into Belfast for less than a day and met the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. The occasion? 25 years of peace in Northern Ireland.
25 years ago this week, the landmark Belfast Good Friday Agreement was signed. And it wasn't easy. And there were no guarantees that the deal on paper would hold. No guarantees that it would be able to deliver the progress we celebrate today. It took long, hard years of work to get to this place.
The agreement ended 3 decades of bloodshed between mainly Catholic nationalists who opposed British rule in Northern Ireland and mainly Protestant Unionists who supported it. Thousands were killed in bombings and other attacks. Under the US brokered agreement, paramilitary groups laid down their arms, direct UK rule was brought to an end, and a power-sharing government was set up in Northern Ireland instead. The peace has been a lasting success, but the government collapsed a year ago in a row over trade rules following Brexit. Some hope that Biden's visit will jolt local politicians into action.
I'm hoping it might give them a kick to say, right, hang on, we actually need to get back here and actually do what we're being paid to do and run the country, because at the minute the country's trying to run itself.
Careful not to overstep, Biden said he hoped the parties would return to the negotiating table so that government could resume. That, he hinted, could be the precursor to more American investment. The US president is now on the second leg of his trip in the Republic of Ireland, where he will address the Dublin Parliament. Biden, who is fiercely proud of his Irish heritage, will also visit his 2 ancestral hometowns.
Well, joining us now from Belfast is our correspondent, Rosie Burchard. Rosie, it's good to see you. The U.S. president, he delivered an address today on this 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. What stood out most to you?
Well, President Biden had a message for the people of Northern Ireland. He said, your history is our history and your future is our future. He said 25 years ago, the US took a bet on Northern Ireland and it's ready to double down on that bet. He spoke of the potential to unleash more prosperity in Northern Ireland. He said that since the Good Friday Agreement, GDP has doubled, and he said he predicts it could triple if things keep moving in the right direction. But of course, that doesn't spell out any sort of a threat there, but there is a suggestion that this trip, despite it being an occasion to mark a celebration, 25 years of peace, a peace that has endured, for some, Brent, it's a bittersweet visit. And that's because while that peace spelled out in the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, has remained, the institutions that it spells out, that it lays out in the document, well, they are simply not functioning properly. There is no fully functioning devolved government here in Northern Ireland, and that's down to that political stalemate over post-Brexit trading arrangements. And Joe Biden said he hopes that the devolved government here will be restored, but he didn't go any further than that, as we heard in the report, quite careful in his choice of words.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, were there reactions from across the political spectrum in Northern Ireland to what was said today?
Well, there were some people I spoke to that were optimistic that Joe Biden's visit could perhaps move the dial here. After these talks, I spoke to Sir Geoffrey Donaldson. He is the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party. That, Brent, is the party which has been refusing to form a devolved government here, complaining that the post-Brexit trading arrangements for Northern Ireland are posing really an existential threat to Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom. Take a listen to what he had to say when I asked him whether Biden's visit would make a difference to his own party's position.
I don't think the visit today will change the political dynamic necessarily. We welcome the visit of the President and his commitment to continue helping Northern Ireland. We would like to see more American investment. Some of the US companies that have set up in Northern Ireland have done very well, and of course we always welcome that kind of investment and those jobs. So hopefully the President's visit today will lead to more American investment. But he was very clear in the conversation I had with him that he's not here to interfere politically, that it is a matter for the political leadership in Northern Ireland to make the decisions on the way forward.
Well, Brent, the source of this dispute is actually pretty technical. It's about customs and checks on some goods from crossing from Great Britain into Northern Ireland, so from the rest of the UK into Northern Ireland. But of course, those technical issues boil down to the most primordial of questions here in Northern Ireland about borders and identity and about feelings of Britishness and of Irishness.
And Rosie, the role of the United States in keeping the Good Friday Agreement intact these past 25 years, I mean, that is clear. What about the role of the U.S., though, in Northern Ireland moving forward?
So US President Joe Biden announced that there will be a trade delegation of American companies coming to Northern Ireland later in this year. And he did sort of dangle that economic carrot there. He said that peace goes hand in hand with economic prosperity. But as Sir Geoffrey Donaldson alluded to, Biden was careful not to seem like he was bullying or putting pressure on any of the political parties here. And Brent, he did not stick around to labour the point. He has already left Belfast, crossing to the Republic of Ireland, where he will be ringing peace bells and visiting ancestral towns. He will be addressing the Irish Parliament, meeting the Irish Prime Minister and the President. Plenty of talk to be expected there of friendship and friendly ties, altogether much less contentious than the visit here in Belfast, which, though the message from President Biden was one of hope, of perseverance, is set against such a more complicated political backdrop.
Yeah, Brexit has certainly not made the situation easier, that is for sure. DW's Rosie Burchard in Belfast for us. Rosie, as always, thank you. Well, I'm joined now by Conal Parr. He's an Irish political history expert at the Northumbria University in Newcastle. He joins us tonight from the Irish capital, Dublin. Conal, it's good to have you with us. How important was the role that the United States played in securing the Good Friday Agreement 25 years ago?
Oh, the United States was hugely important in it in lots of ways. Remember that the US Special Envoy to Northern Ireland, George Mitchell, who obviously had a long career in Senate politics and in American politics, was the person who chaired the all-party talks. He was appointed especially by President Clinton at the time, and Clinton himself had set the groundwork for a lot of what eventually became the Mitchell Principles, which George Mitchell produced to flow from that. And generally speaking, Mitchell won the respect and commanded the respect of a lot of politicians in Northern Ireland in a way which hadn't happened before. Generally speaking, you'd say the US plays that kind of honest broker role very successfully, and they have, since the Good Friday Agreement, also maintained that and kept a close eye on Northern Ireland.
And what was it about the U.S., or maybe about the personality of Mitchell, that made the country an agreeable broker to both sides in the talks?
Well, it's an interesting thing. Often, sometimes on the unionist side, on the Protestant unionist side, there would be a sort of mistrust of the United States, because remember that from the east coast of America, the Provisional IRA had secured a lot of weaponry and funds for really the duration of the whole Troubles conflict. So it took a lot of charisma and a lot of bridge building on Mitchell's part to win their trust, and I think that he basically, through a combination of his kind of personality and his kind of affability and his charm, these important qualities, even a bit of humor thrown in there, he basically kind of wins the trust of the Unionists as well as the nationalist politicians. Remember, John Hume had been the SDLP leader, one of the architects of the Good Friday Agreement, had been one of the people who'd always been on the United States and in Boston and New York, building up support in Irish-American networks, including with the current president, who of course has his connections and power base in Delaware politics. So it's an interesting thing to see all those things come together, and Mitchell was the man who was there and able to pull it off at the time.
I want to talk with you about the challenges presented by Brexit in just a moment. But first, the Good Friday Agreement, it wasn't the culmination of the peace process, but rather the start of that process. What role has the U.S. played post-1998 in keeping the peace process going?
Well, you have to remember that just after the Good Friday Agreement, there was 9/11, firstly, and what happens then is that basically the American government's, what was then the George W. Bush administration, puts pressure on the IRA to decommission quite quickly, and you do see by 2005 they have done that. So you have a big connection between what US presidents are doing and Northern Ireland always in this time. But also remember, in terms of, just that useful perspective that the United States offers, you have to remember that the government of the UK and also to an extent the government of Ireland can never be truly neutral in those situations and when you come in to look at Northern Ireland. So it's a very interesting thing that the United States is capable of doing. It's not to say that there aren't problems within American politics and society, but they are very good at kind of coming in. And it was interesting even tonight. Final thing I'd say on this is that Micheál Martin, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, mentioned the work of the International Fund for Ireland, for instance, which pumps a lot of money into sort of border communities and peace work on the ground. And again, that's a sign that has been going since the mid-80s, since the Anglo-Irish Agreement in 1985. So that tells you again just how much America does put into Northern Ireland and Ireland.
And we know that Brexit has put a huge strain on the peace process. What role has the United States played in making sure that Brexit did not reverse the gains that have already been made?
A very huge, again, hugely important role here. You have to remember that now at the same time, what you might say at the time when Donald Trump, post-2016, post-Brexit, Trump was perhaps one of those presidents who would occasionally pay lip service to the Irish-American lobby, but really wasn't as committed to it as someone like Biden would have been. Biden has been since he's taken office in 2020. And I think you have to remember the way that Biden looked on this, which was that there were some when there was talk after Brexit of a free trade agreement between the United States and the UK, Biden made it very clear that the US government wasn't going to approve something along those lines. And remember, there is bipartisan support between Republicans and Democrats in American politics for this. So he wasn't going to support a free trade deal which might shaft or undermine Ireland in any way. Mm-hmm. And so he has been someone who's kept this close to his heart. He has someone who's kept his eye on this situation very closely. And he's always made it clear, even if you look at his visit last night with him coming into Northern Ireland and traveling south today, that you get the strong sense that this is a man who, he wasn't going to London. He was coming into Ireland, and he wants to stay in Ireland, and he pays a lot of time. He gives a lot of his time and a lot of his energy to this in a way that not all U.S. presidents would do.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you make, and I heard today that he had made it a point that he didn't want to meddle in the current stalemate that we're seeing right now in Northern Irish political institutions. But is there a role that the U.S. can play maybe to end that stalemate at all?
Yes, I think there is. And I think that for what it's worth, though, sometimes again, he gets sort of some detractors on the unionist side. And even I'm seeing on the Conservative Party in the UK at the moment. It was very interesting how he played it today. His talk at the University of Ulster, opening the new building there in the centre of Belfast, he was emphasising that the US would support investment, that there was going to be a potential dividend that the United States could send Northern Ireland's way if it would smooth and help the situation. And he's been very clear. Remember what he said last night. He said, when questioned, what he was most asking for when it came to Northern Ireland was to keep the peace, and that's what the United States can and will do. And they're emphasizing that through those kind of making it business friendly, something which would be open to investors. And he's very much playing that up. He's not leaning towards the sentimental, romantic view of a nation once again.
Conal Parr, Irish political history expert at the Northumbria University. Conal, it's good talking with you. We appreciate your time. Valuable context tonight. Thank you.